Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the December 2024 episode of the ongoing bi-monthly FR Panorama series. I'm Larry Liberti, and together with my host, Mario Alanis, as always, we'll be hosting today's webinar. And we'll be looking into how are reference agencies evolving to meet the needs of the evolving regulatory landscape. A very, very interesting topic that is of timely nature. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so we'll keep the introduction short. FR Panorama is an educational program of the RUD Foundation. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization presented in collaboration with the USC DK Kim International Center for Regulatory Science, which together bring you the FR Path project. We're also most grateful for the ongoing support provided by MSD for the FR Panorama series. As a reminder, prior webinars are all archived on the frpath.org website. As the regulatory world becomes more interconnected, we've seen the increasing value of the work being done by so-called reference agencies. Some years ago, through a systematic assessment process, the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, designated a number of Latin American regulators as agencies of regional reference. And they did that to encourage reference agencies to strengthen regulatory systems and to potentially help reliance using the decisions that were made by these agencies. As time passed, we have witnessed the evolution of the World Health Organization Global Benchmarking Tool, the GBT, and the designation of maturity level 3 and maturity level 4 agencies with the focus on what are called WLA, WHO listed authorities, which have repaved the concept of a stringent regulatory authority. Well, according to the WHO, implementation of the WLA framework is intended to promote access and the supply of safe, effective, and quality medicines. It's a noble goal. The framework also provides for the optimal use of limited resources by facilitating reliance on the work products and decisions of trusted agencies in the decision-making of regulatory authorities, including a variety of other activities. New ML3 and ML4 agencies are being identified almost monthly, as is the recognition of WLAs. If you have access to the frpath.org full database, you'll know that the FRPath database lists more than 36 WLAs at this point. So today, we are deep diving into how reference agencies have grown in importance and how they interact with each other and how technology is supporting the evolution of information sharing. So please join Mario and I in welcoming our colleagues.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you very much for this great introduction. And I'm going to proceed without much comments to introduce our distinguished guest today. First, it is a pleasure for me to introduce Neil McCausland, who is the director of the Center for Innovation in Regulatory Science, a center where I have been collaborating for a number of years for Latin American projects. And he is going to discuss the role of reference agencies in facilitating reliance. We are going to have also Myung-Ha Chung, who is a fellow at the DK Kim Center for International Regulatory Science at the University of Southern California in the Department of Regulatory and Quality Science. And she's going to talk about Korea's MFDS, international cooperation, and role as a reference regulatory authority. We are going to have as well Ropa Hope, who is the Chief Regulatory Officer at the Botswana Medicines Regulatory Agency, BoMRA, and she's going to talk about using reference agencies to inform regulatory decisions. We are going to have as well Dominique Lagrave, who is the Senior Vice President of Regulatory Innovation at Accumulus Synergy. This very important organization that is helping exchange information, and he's going to talk about how novel technologies are facilitating sharing regulatory data between reference and reliant agencies. And for the first time in this session, and we are going to continue having, we will be introducing junior new generation professionals who are believed are becoming the stars in the field of regulatory science. And this time, to inaugurate this section, we will have in the panel Bakani Nekub, and he is a regulatory affairs associate at Market Access Africa. Please, I welcome everyone, and I ask Neil to start with his section. Welcome, everyone. No.
Oh, all right. Hi. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Mario. It's very nice to be here. It's very nice to be invited back, as they say. So looking forward to the discussion. So what I'm going to do in the next 12 minutes or so is just talk a little bit about the role of reference agencies in facilitating reliance. But first of all, I suppose and I know that most people who are on this will know what the official definition of reliance is. The act where a regulatory authority in one jurisdiction takes into account and gives significant weight to assessments performed by another regulatory agency or trusted institution. It's also important that the relying agency remains independent, responsible, and accountable for the decisions taken. But I think, as you can see from that first bit of the statement, that reference agencies or other trusted institutions are really important in the reliance space. And that's irrespective of maturity and resources, because as WHO says, any agency can take advantages of work and decisions of other regulatory agencies. Of course, reliance and collaboration is a 21st century tool, as we keep hearing from EMEA. But when we start to look at the models for, there are a number of models for what I would call reliance models, whether those are collaborative evaluations like Project Orbis or work shares like Access, and then you've got these regional reliance joint mechanisms in Africa, as well as in Europe in terms of the centralized procedure. But I think today we're in terms of the reference agency, or the needs of the reference agency, is often where country A relies on the reference agency assessment. And that's what we call kind of unilateral reliance. And there's a number of examples of those over the years in terms of that have been initiated. And we see this list growing, and this is just some examples. So what it suggests is, of course, for this particular route, and this is just one part of the toolkit that regulators have, the utilization of reliance, reference agencies, of course, in their facilitation of information is really key in terms of how reliance actually gets done. But just to give some statistics, because I do work for the Center for Innovation and Regulatory Science, I just wanted to say that, of course, if you just take it in terms of the time it takes to get a medicine to be approved, we can see here for both Egypt, for an abridged route where they require reference agency approval versus the full assessment, both helps in terms of the time taken to get submitted to those agencies, as well as the time taken in the approval space. And we see that in Saudi for their verification route and abridged route, again, which is underpinned the utilization of reference agency approvals. So again, reference agencies are helping facilitate that, what I would call earlier access into the healthcare systems of these particular countries. But what is a reference agency? And I suppose if you asked, this is the WHO Good Reliance definition, is a national or regional authority or a trusted institution such as WHO pre-qualification, whose regulatory decisions or regulatory work products are relied upon by another regulatory authority to inform its own regulatory decisions. And Larry talked about back to that later, but the surveys and studies that we do at CIRS in terms of looking at, when we ask agencies who their reference agencies are, or when we look at the guidelines, the list of agencies you see on the slide are usually the ones that are mentioned in some sort of form. And it's usually US FDA and the European Medicines Agency, and then we get slightly less in terms of the other agencies. But the one that I would say that comes up in terms of being utilized the most is the European Medicines Agency, in terms of that information being available and also the ability to provide reports, both public and non-public reports. But why? What do agencies do if they want to pick an agency to be a reference agency? What is it that's needed by the reference agency needs to have that the country looks for? This is a study that we did way back in 2019, but I think it still holds today. When we asked for those countries you see at the bottom there, in selecting reference agencies, what are your considerations? And you can see out of all of them, it was the utility and compliance to global standards and technical guidelines. And this is where ICH and the whole area of good GXPs come into play, because if agencies are following these, what I would say, global standards, then you could be sure or trusted in terms of them delivering a similar type of review than you would be doing as a relying agency. But also important is the availability of the agency's assessment reports, either from the sponsoring company or from the agency, to be provided, because otherwise you can't really leverage it if you don't have the information which to make that decision on. The integrity of the decision-making in terms of being consistent, science-based, robust decision-making by the reference agency, of course, is key. And this is where you need kind of similar risk tolerances between the relying agency and the reference agency. And then more after that, things like transparent communication processes. A number of the reference agency needs to release reports in English, because in terms of having a standard language, and less so about having an MOU. And of course, if we go back to the WHO Good Reliance Practice Guideline, we can see that NRAs that seek, their view is that NRAs that seek to act as reference agencies are encouraged to issue public assessment reports in a common language to document their regulatory decisions. Relying agencies should use such reports as the primary source of information for assessments. And the IPRP also talk about the need for that information from the reference agency. But we also get the view within the good reliance practice that if no public assessment reports are available, or when additional information or confidential nature is required, then the manufacturer should provide that, or if not, it's not possible, the relying could request that from the reference agency. So reference agencies are very much entangled within this in terms of making sure reliance both operates and is successful. But when we move to public assessment reports, and this is just a schematic from one of our briefings, we know that public assessment reports are there to communicate the basis of the decision to stakeholders such as patients, healthcare, and professionals in industry. But in reality, they weren't designed for other regulatory authorities to use them to inform their own regulatory decisions. So in a way, public assessment reports are starting to be used for something that maybe the reference agency didn't initially write them for. And I think this is one of those changes over time that we'll see reference agencies as they evolve, perhaps understanding what is it that the relying agencies require in order to help them leverage the decisions they've made. And indeed, when we did ask this in terms of from agencies, in terms of what the challenges and solutions were on relating to public assessment reports, the limited access or availability was out there. The ability to need, it posted on a platform in a very short time frame was key, as well as, making sure that it's there for all the applications. And I think this is one of the things that, as we look at this, of course, in terms of the quality of reports and completeness, and this becomes important for the new WLAs in terms of, is there a standard criteria for public assessment reports that provides the right information? So when we did speak to agencies and through one of our surveys in terms of why are they actually requesting beyond the public assessment report in terms of non-public information, product sameness comes out, and I think that's been discussed through this webinar series in the past, but it's really about understanding the reference agency's decision-making. There needs to be enough information in either the public assessment reports or the non-public documents that provides the insight to the relying agency on how the decisions have been made in order for them to know whether they can leverage that fully for their own population. And I think this is one of those key things going forward in terms of evolving the reference agency needs, is how best can that be done? So when we talk about non-publicly available documents in terms of the challenges and solutions, one of the things there, of course, is the difficulty for agencies perhaps in obtaining relevant non-public documents in a timely manner. And that is, of course, one of the things is that could be implemented through MOUs or confidentiality agreements. But interestingly, at a recent webinar that FPA ran, EMA responded that, of course, one of the things they think is that the manufacturers should be able to supply these documents if they are supplied to the manufacturers. And of course, it's also about the relying NRAs requesting those documents early. But one of the other ways is this lack of communication channels and the development of secure platforms and databases and protocols for handling and sharing non-public documents. And I'm really delighted that Dom's going to be talking about perhaps one of those later, because I think that's kind of one of the way forward in relation to how do we increase dialogue amongst regulators, but also having a trusted way of providing information that is relevant. In terms of, just to kind of finish off in what Larry's talked about in terms of this growing number of WHO listed authorities as WHO does the assessments through the GBT, I think the thing that's important here is that once they get to WLA status and they want to, because they're globally recognized as in terms of what has been, and they're used or selected for reference agency as a reference agency, they need to have public assessment reports that can be relied upon that helps provide the documents their regulatory decision. And one of the things that we looked at when we talked to agencies in terms of the review is there really isn't a clear and harmonized standard with regard to that. And I think that's really important going forward, is maybe there needs to be, as more and more WLAs become reference agencies, is there a standardized way the information should be documented in their assessment reports, so their public assessment reports, that is systematic, so that it doesn't matter which reference agency you're utilizing, you know where the information is held, and it's in enough depth for the relying agency to utilize in a way that's practical. So just to summarize and finish off, I think in terms of the role of the reference agency in facilitating reliance, of course, the key one is resource optimization within the relying agency, because by leveraging the reference agencies, it helps allow that agency to focus on value-added evaluations and reduce duplication. In terms of, it also helps accelerate the review process. I did show some information earlier, which allows the agency to perhaps speed up the review process, as well as things that, because reliance isn't just about new active substance, but also things like post-licensing variations. But we often hear about reference agencies assessment reports being used as a core bit of training for on supporting relying agencies. So it also helps build capacity, and in that helps build in, I would say, quality into the regulatory process of relying agencies. So another way reference agencies can facilitate reliance. Of course, ultimately, in terms of international cooperation, harmonization of standards, particularly as we see both reference agencies and relying agencies utilizing the same trusted information and the way that medicines are being developed. And ultimately, of course, it's about enhanced public health outcomes. And I think with that, I will stop and hand it back to Mario and Larry and say, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Neil. Thanks very much for helping to set the stage. I'm always impressed with the wonderful work that CRS does in bringing practical information to these sessions and really getting a sense of what the industry believes, what the agencies think are important. And we'll dive into this a little bit more when we have some discussion time at the end. You know, among the most innovative reference agencies, I would say, is South Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, the MFDS. Well, today I'm really pleased to introduce you to my colleague Myung-Ah Chung. Myung-Ah is a fellow within our organization at the D.K. Kim International Center for Regulatory Science and has joined us for a while. She will be sharing with us today some of her reflections on how the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety and their activities position the agency as a reference agency. So I'll turn it over to Myung-Ah, and please, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Thank you for giving me this this opportunity to present the international cooperation activities of Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety and its role as a reference regulatory authority in the global medical product sector. Today, I will talk how the MFDS contribute to global regulatory harmonization and supports the growth of Korea's medical product industry while ensuring public health worldwide. I would like to clarify that the content of this presentation is a condensed version of publicly disclosed materials and media released regarding MFDS international cooperation activities and reflects my personal opinion. The MFDS play a critical role in the international regulation of pharmaceuticals, vaccines, and medical devices. Its activities aim to build global trust as a regulatory authority, strengthen global standards and regulatory harmonization, support Korean companies in expanding to global markets, contribute to public health by ensuring safe and effective medical products. In this presentation, I will talk you through the MFDS partnerships, activities, and achievements that solidify its position as a trusted global regulatory leader. First, let me begin by discussing the collaborative relationship with WHO. The MFDS has built strong partnerships with WHO. In 2023, the MFDS was listed as a WHO-listed authority, WLA, recognizing it as a trusted reference regulatory authority. This makes the MFDS the first WLA in the world. The following 8 regulatory functions in the field of medicine and vaccines are included. And in the field of marketing authorization, the performance evaluation has been completed and additional listing is expected to be finalized in the first half of next year. It contributes to WHO's pre-qualification programs for medicine and vaccines, also the operation of the WHO Collaborating Center and the contracted testing are being actively carried out. In the field of medical devices, efforts are being made to standardize regulatory system for advanced products, with active participation, particularly in joint assessment of in vitro diagnostic medical devices. As you know, the ICH is a global initiative that develops harmonized guidelines to ensure the safety, quality, and efficacy of pharmaceuticals. Since joining in 2016, the MFDS has implemented ICH guidelines, aligning its pharmaceutical regulations with international standards. The IPRP is a platform for pharmaceutical regulatory authorities worldwide to collaborate, share information, and harmonize practice to enhance the quality, safety, and efficacy of pharmaceutical products. MFDS actively participate in working group focused on areas such as pharmaceutical quality, bioequivalence, and nanotechnology, sharing the latest regulatory perspectives. Especially within the biosimilar, cell therapy, and gene therapy working groups, MFDS continued to engage in active efforts, including guideline development and sharing of review reports. The PICS is the international network of regulatory authorities that aim to GMP standards and enhance collaboration in pharmaceutical inspection worldwide. The MFDS passed its PICS re-evaluation in 2024, confirming its compliance with global GMP standards for pharmaceuticals. The IMDRF is a global initiative aimed at harmonizing medical device regulation and promoting regulatory convergence to ensuring the safety and effectiveness of medical devices worldwide. As a full member since 2017, the MFDS leads effort to harmonize regulations for medical devices, especially in areas like AI and cybersecurity. GHWP. The GHWP is an international collaboration aimed at harmonizing medical device regulations across different regions, with a focus on enhancing regulatory practice and ensuring the safety and effectiveness of medical devices worldwide. As the chair of the working group, MFDS is leading the development of international harmonized guidelines, particularly for combination products such as advanced medical devices. The MFDS fulfills its role as a reference regulatory authority in several ways, leading regulatory harmonization. It contributes to developing global standards through partnership with WHO, ICH, IPRP, and PICS. Capacity building, the MFDS offers technical training and consultation to developing countries, enhancing their regulatory capabilities. Improving public health. By ensuring the safety and quality of medical products, the MFDS actively addresses global public health challenges. Supporting Korean industry, the MFDS simplifies the approval process for Korean product entering global market by aligning its regulation with internal standards. These activities reinforce the MFDS global leadership and strengthen Korea's position as a trusted regulatory partner. The MFDS efforts have resulted in global recognition, being designated as a WLA and participating in global organizations like IMDRF and ICH, industry growth, supporting the globalization of Korean pharmaceuticals, vaccines, and medical devices, leadership in innovation, setting standards for emerging technologies such as AI and digital health devices, public health contributions, improving access to safe and effective medical products worldwide. These achievements highlight the MFDS impact on both public health and industrial competitiveness. In conclusion, the MFDS play a vital role in strengthening global regulatory framework, enhancing public health through its trusted evaluations, supporting the growth of Korea's medical product industry on the global stage. Through the active international collaboration and leadership, the MFDS continue to contribute to safer, more effective medical products for people worldwide. Thank you for attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Myung-ha, for giving an overview of all the activities of Korea's Ministry of Food, Ministry of Drugs and Food. Now we are going to discuss the benefits of having a reference agencies, and these benefits can be readily seen by reliant agencies for whom, as the World Health Organization has indicated, the reference agency provides a framework for optimal use of resources by facilitating reliance on the work and product and decisions of the trusted agencies. We are so pleased today to have to be joined Ropa Hope, Chief Regulatory Officer of Botswana Medicines Regulatory Authority, BoMRA, who will provide her reflections on the importance of reference agencies. Welcome, Ropa.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to present today on the issue of using reference agencies to inform regulatory decision-making. BoMRA is a fairly young regulator, having been established in 2013, the enabling legislation, but only starting to function in 2018 when it was staffed. So essentially, this is a 5-year-old regulator. Notwithstanding that, we realized that the legislation had mandated BoMRA on the 8 regulatory functions. Some of them have already been referred to. We straight away in 2019 had collaboration and strategic partnerships through signing memorandum of understanding. And in the MOUs, the areas for collaboration were the exchange of information, which essentially is reliance and sharing documentation to enhance regulatory processes. And these MOUs were signed with reference national regulatory authorities on the continent, and these, all of them, therefore, they have attained maturity level 3. And also the other area was to enhance regulatory practices in all the regulatory functions, but in a stepwise approach. Capacity building, already referred to by earlier speakers, has been a great source of building capacity within a new regulator in regulatory excellence, as well as provision of technical and funding support. In terms of the continental approach of coming up with a best practices reliance model, there were issues around in making sure that the Enabling Act would have legal provisions that would cater for relying on a reference regulator, as well as issues around data sharing and transparency, the collaboration and networking, which is enhanced, as well as a risk-based approach. We had incorporated this in our MOUs, and we continue to expand. And as I earlier said, to say that it is a stepwise approach, it's not possible for a new regulator to be proficient and rely, to be proficient and be able to perform all the regulatory functions. So the main one was we started with marketing authorization for medicines, for medical devices, to be able to rely on the decisions that are done elsewhere. And on inspections, we are relying on decisions that have been made by reference NRAs. The major aspect that we benefited from was the issue of work sharing within the Zazibona, which is a work sharing initiative, which is in Southern Africa in the SADC region. And BoMRA was assigned the activity of coordinating issues around good manufacturing practices, issues around review of desk review of applications that would have been submitted. So through that collaboration, while being a fairly new regulator, but you then get support from those that are more experienced. And looking now at international level, issues of the WHO pre-qualification as a regulatory pathway that benefits us in terms of making sure that the time frame is reduced. The challenges that we have been experiencing as a new regulator is issues around the collaboration and communication in terms of prioritizing area of priority. When you are a 5-year-old regulator, of course, priority areas are different from a well-established regulator who has been in in action for the last 20, 30 years. Those are issues which we continue to discuss in terms of the MOUs that we have and other fora that we have in terms of being members of different international fora, to be able to then say, how do you leverage the focus areas? How do you leverage the priorities? How do you leverage to be able to get value out of the strategic partnerships? And then in terms of training and resource, we realize that the two sometimes don't go together. For example, for lot release, it is one of the functions that we exercise in Reliance, and we have identified the reference regulators. And then they pointed out that for training to be able to be done, they needed to have sufficient resources to be able to conduct that training, and the resources may then be identified or secured maybe at a later stage that may not necessarily be aligned to that of the Reliance partner. The issues that BoMRA identified from the outset was the issue of attaining maturity level 3. So we would then have identified institutional development plans that would require resourcing for us to be able to be up to speed and be able to attain maturity level 3. So this is one of the areas that, again, in terms of priority, in terms of resourcing, would negatively affect a Reliance partner. Technology in the area of exchange of information within the arena of regulatory agencies, the current discussions within our space with respect to information integrated regulatory management systems, IRIMS, where we are then discussing to say we need to have interoperability when we are using different systems, when we want to now exchange information, want to share information. Are we able to share that information in a manner that would address the reference agency and the Reliance agency? Because when the area initially evolved, NRAs had identified different approaches, and it is now with the AMA in the process of being established that the AMA coordinates and say, let us have IRIMS that would be able to talk to each other. And I'm glad to say this is a process that is at an advanced stage, and BoMRA had already put in place, developed an IRIMS that would talk to other technologies that are in the continent so that we can have interoperability and we can then exchange information easier and reports can be exchanged much in a better way. So basically, these are the experiences that we have, and we are excited particularly to be in this webinar, to be able to see possibilities of identifying other sectors that can be able to appreciate where we are at and where they are at. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ropa. That was, it's fascinating how much you've accomplished in 5 years. Like you say, the concept of Reliance has played an important role in this evolution of your agency. And one of the things that I was thinking about is the aspect that you brought up about levering value of collaboration and communication. And it's really fascinating to hear what Myung-Ah has said with regard to her understanding of her agency's position as a reference agency, how you rely on reference agencies, and this important aspect of the interplay between these agencies being based on communication and information sharing. It's something that we heard over and over again. And I think one of the important aspects of this is is technology allowing us to evolve the ability to communicate, to have interoperability, as you mentioned, to be able to share information more quickly and efficiently. And there are a number of initiatives ongoing in this region and area. And as you mentioned, Ropa, you've even developed some of your own technologies, and the African Medicines Agency is moving in a direction. But, among the most robust of the systems for regulatory information sharing is that developed by the nonprofit Accumulus Synergy Group. And many of you have heard of Accumulus Synergy, but we thought it would be valuable to be able to bring a representative from this nonprofit here today because of the work that they've done over the last several years, bringing together many different kinds of stakeholders in making a vision that some of us thought about years ago when we didn't even know that something like the cloud could exist. I know that Neil McCausland and I sat around more than a decade ago thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if we could have regulatory information sitting somewhere that we could turn on little levers and people could access this information and it could be updated? And we had no idea how that could happen. And in fact, people much smarter than us have come up with the concept that is being pioneered by Accumulus Synergy. So today we're really happy to be joined by Dom Legrave. Dom is the Senior Vice President of Regulatory Innovation at Accumulus Synergy. And today he's going to share with us the concepts around how novel technologies are facilitating sharing regulatory data between different agencies. Really excited to hear about these initiatives. And Dom, so over to you.
Thank you very much, Larry and Mara, for the kind introductions. And it's truly a pleasure to be here today. So I'm going to walk you through, a few slides highlighting, again, our approach, right, to support, in this case, reliance and overall, collaboration. I had the pleasure of attending the IGDRA meeting in India, and also very recently the MRH meeting with the MSTC discussions on technology as well. And what came out of discussions, right, is really this notion of one world, one health, one dossier. So not only access to the information, but how we can move towards convergence and share the same type of information. So let's go. So who are we? I think I'm going to go very quickly. I guess some of you already know who we are, but we're a non-for-profit organizations. We're created about three years ago from the vision of the industry and regulators as a way to help accelerate, right, access to therapies for patients around the globe. We continue to see a lag between, when new chemical entities are available in developed countries and the rest of the world. And in this day and age, again, as WHO mentions, there is one world and one health. So how can we help support and use technology as an enabler to support greater access to information? And really the vision is this notion of a dossier in the cloud, right? Is how can we access information that is tailored for this usage, that is of course secure, but provide the trust that is needed, and really this transparency, which is the anchor of reliance. So again, we started a journey around how can we provide this information in a secure, scalable way between life science organizations and regulators. I'll cover afterwards the first project we started with, but the platform was built for purpose directly to support the first reliance program that started actually in January 2024. And again, the anchor was really building this trust and transparency within the platform. Basically, everybody see the exact same information in real time and can interact with the content that is made available to them. The next phase of our journey from this initial collaboration now is the capacity actually to also share the dossier, right? Part of Reliance is having access to the same information, and we discuss unredacted, quote unquote, information, including the full potential, if you think about EMA, the full EMA dossier that serves to get, in this case, the post-approval change approved, will be made available to all countries. That brings two notions. First of all, again, is you see exactly what other agencies have used in order to come to a decisions. But also it will provide this notion of a single dossier, right? Potentially removing some local specific requirements, but again, providing potentially in some cases more information that is needed for regulatory agencies, but again, transparency in how a decision was made. And as we evolve, right, the ecosystem is broader than just license organizations and regulatory agencies. We will expand access to academia and other organizations or CMOs along the way. We had actually just a press release a couple of days ago highlighting how again Accumulus will collaborate directly with CEPI also in support of pandemic regulatory preparedness as well. So we're engaged as well with other non-for-profit, including WHO, Gates Foundation, and CEPI, again, to help move all together in the same directions of this approach of a single dossier. What have we built? And I think getting down to what Neil presented earlier is what are the information that is important for a set of countries to rely on reference health authorities. And the first part is this notion of having access to all the questions and responses associated with the dossier, not only from the reference authorities, but also on an ongoing basis in real time, having access when a country is asking a question, drafting it. This is made available to all the other countries. They can comment on the question while it's still draft and therefore exchange informations. And then, of course, once the question or set of questions are sent to the life science organizations, they will receive altogether, again, the responses with the notification that this information is available. There's also a way to avoid duplication of efforts. If you have a question that has already been asked or similar one being asked directly, you can refer back directly to the questions, the answers, and potentially any attachments associated with it. Also, it means to track other national regulatory agencies' decisions. So when you have a large numbers of countries, you can see, who has quote unquote come to decisions or approval in the platforms. And again, this provides full transparency in how, in this case, a change in manufacturing is able to get, again, reviewed and approved with other countries. Invitation is key. It has to come down from again, a life science organization inviting a set of countries that will be in scope for the intended change. And again, what we're seeing, most of those changes currently related to CMC. We'll cover, we have other ones coming up as well, when there is potential impact with supply to patients. I'm going to move a little bit on the right-hand side is really access to the information. And currently they can access either to a full dossier. What I mean full is that going to be module 2 to module 5. Again, what is core and common on many countries. Removing module 1, which is local or regional. We leverage the ECTD in the back, but we're not exposing an ECTD. We're exposing a digital dossier in the cloud, as we mentioned, in a very simple user interface so that people at all levels of maturities can access the same information. They see the same dossier. And later on, we'll be adding the capacity to provide comments and inline questions directly into this dossier. Important, the reference health authority assessment report, this will be provided by the life science organization at this stage. The reference HA provide these informations there, and then the manufacturer will upload this information within the Accumulus platform. They will also upload any decision letters or reference health authority questions or any other content. and will use the platform to share that directly with all the country. With one click, they can invite a very large numbers of countries. And then also they can agree upon a specific milestone set of how many, dates from submissions to potential dates to receive questions and responses, and a target approval date, which is often based on the recommendation from WHO around the 6 months timeframe. So now we're going to move to, from the theory to a practical example, and I want to thank, our colleague from Roche for enabling sharing the slides. That was mentioned in other presentations before. So Roche was the first company that's starting to work and pilot, in this case, what I believe is still the largest pilot in Reliance, and leveraging, a portion of the platforms to share health authority question and responses. The aim was to get, you can see the numbers, 48 regulators in 6 continents to be able to process the same change pretty much in parallel. This, again, provided around 87 of those countries did approve within the 7 months timeframe. So dramatically accelerating with some of the top about 100 weeks reductions in global approval time on average. Roche also has published, every single country's, delta between the normal standard approval timeline for such a change and what they saw, but they saw a dramatic decrease of that. But also wasn't more important is there a lot of approval came without questions. I'm going to see a bit details around that. And what it provides as well, right, is predictabilities, because there's so much clusters of those approvals coming at the same time from the supply chain. It provides a huge advantage to be able to plan and ensure again supply for major drugs to patients around the globe. And it was great to see that we have maturity 1 all the way to maturity 4 that have participated into this Reliance program, and email was used as the reference HAs. So how do you know that Reliance is working? Again, this is one project, but I think this one was very telling, right? Is the notion also that you want to have convergence. In this case, around 48 countries, you can see over here 85 questions asked together. And again, it was a major CMC changes. But what was more important is that 14 countries only issued questions around the 48. And when you see how they've been breaking down, essentially, the questions about very specific requirements were actually very, very limited. Only 10% of the questions were related to local requirements, which again drives this notion that while there is local requirements, reliance and access to transparency and full dossier that is identical to all country do help to reduce those very specific requirements locally, and again enable a notion of convergence driving towards the single dossier in the cloud. So where are we today? Fast forward, I know we're starting in January. Now in December, we have 4 active projects into the platforms. We're launching about 5 new ones in early 2025. They're a little bit different. Some of them actually quite interesting. Another one that's going to start in January will have, in this case, normally 2-step processes where the reference HA, they get the approvals, and then we start the Reliance phase. One project will start in early January that actually will have the reference HA and all the other involved countries. I think the number is around 40 will receive the dossier on the very same day in January via the platform, and also, of course, followed by normal means, which means that the intended end-to-end of this Reliance program, including the reference HA, will be around 6 months. So dramatic accelerations. And again, seeing live in the platforms, the reference HAs and all the other countries basically having information accessible to them. We're also driving other type of projects, we say PAC Reliance, we have line extensions coming up. There's also WHO SRS CRP coming, and all the other areas where essentially content can be shared and at scale, and of course in a secure and platforms available free of access for all the national regulatory agencies around the globe as well. Today we have about 160 accounts in areas across the globe in the platforms, 41 countries have access to the platform as we speak, and this is growing as new pilots are coming. And then we have right now 16 countries who are repeated users, which means that they have no running multiple projects in parallel. And with that, I'm going to thank you. And again, if you have any further questions as well, I put my email addresses over here, and I'm going to return back to Larry and Mario. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. What a fascinating process, huh?
Yes.
And what I think we've seen across all of these speakers today is how quickly this whole field is moving. It's one of those things that if we were to have this session again 6 months from now, we would have updates and changes that would be transitional and really transformative. So as promised, I think we've covered an awful lot of ground in the last hour, and we have a little bit of time to reflect on some of the topics. So if the participants could come on, I'd like to actually get things started by inviting our guest panelist, Bakani and Kubi. Bakani is a longstanding colleague who has a very deep knowledge of the African regulatory scene. He did his master's work investigating how the African Medicines Agency was coming together and some of the legal issues that it was facing and how it overcame them. And today is pursuing his doctorate in regulatory at Witwatersrand University. So we're very pleased to have Bakani here as kind of our upcoming regulatory professional. So Bakani, you heard some very interesting presentations, and from your standpoint, what has touched you with regard to some of the activities that you've heard us talk about?
Thank you so much, Larry, for having me, and thanks to all the panelists for such useful insights that you provided. I think two things really stand out. The first is just the importance of trust, building trust in the reliance process. It's very important that regulatory authorities, whether they're up and coming or whether they're operating at a higher maturity level, know how each of their systems are working, and be able to also participate in that process in order to be able to develop that trust. That's very important, to be able to rely on the work output coming from that other authority. The second bit of it is just the importance of capacity building as well, whether it's got to do with the technology that's going to be used for the reliance processes, or if it's actual, technical capacity to review the dossiers or look at the inspection reports. It's very important that you have regulatory authorities, especially the ones that are considered to be reference regulatory authorities, involving NRAs in their own decision-making process in order for that capacity to be built. Ultimately contributing to what Swissmedic calls well-informed reliance, where you have the two authorities, reference authority and the one that's relying on that decision, working together in the assessment, and also leveraging the work output that's coming from there, just to ensure that you get quicker access to medicines for patients. Thanks, Larry.
Well, thanks. Those are, I think, really important topics. And I like this concept of well-informed reliance. And we had some discussions around things like the public assessment reports and whether or not these are completely fit for purpose. And one of the common themes that we've heard from Dom and from Neil is how the EMA is often used as a focal point, as a reference agency. So I just wanted to perhaps have Ropa and then Dom and Neil reflect a little bit about why the EMA might be considered so high up in the list of reference agencies, and also, and especially Ropa, when you look at public assessment reports, do they meet your need? Do you find that there are holes? Do you think you can cover 80% of what you need through the different reference or public assessment reports that you obtain? And so let's talk a little bit about the kind of outputs that a reference agency like the EMA offers and how that helps inform your decision. And then maybe Neil and Dom, you can reflect on that too. So Ropa, over to you.
Thank you very much. I suppose it is an issue of relationships that have been developed between the continent of Africa and Europe, where even the way that our legislation is couched and the way that we approach the whole aspect of regulation, they are it just reflects that the relationship had started much earlier on, and now it's a matter of strengthening the relationship and having access to information that expedites our decision-making processes in a manner that improves on efficiency. So I think also, even when you look at the relationship now with AMA and IMA, it's a relationship that is carrying on to support us as a continent to be able to be confident and to be able to bring ourselves to speed at a much faster rate because of the support that we have received from EMA. I will end there.
Very good points. Neil,
Yes.
and then Dom.
No, I think there's no doubt that that's one of the key points. I think EMA as a reference agency is actively knowing that they're a reference agency. I know the problem is that when the public assessment reports were developed, they weren't developed because they were going to become a reference agency, but they are one of all the agencies, I suppose they're one of the most open to wanting to help. And we're seeing that not just in Africa, but also the fact that they're trying to listen to what is it else could they put in their assessment reports that perhaps would be enable availability. But I think its accessibility is key. English, of course, is helpful in terms of, and that actually there's probably a 3-month delay, but they're relatively quickly published. So I think those things help in terms of the public assessment report. I think the downside, of course, is that public assessment reports, as we're aware, are really probably reasonably okay on the benefit risk side. And of course, EMA now have a very good way of structuring the benefit risk discussion, including the uncertainties, which I think is helpful in terms of understanding that. I think it's in the CMC side that, of course, questions still need to be answered because of confidentiality.
Right. And Dom, how is the Cumulus working within the context of these documents?
No, and this is a great question. I think what we can say is again, EMA has been extremely active in supporting Reliance. I want to call out Martin Harvey and his team to really go and the extra mile and really supporting those pilots. They've been joining multiple sessions, again, with companies and with WHO to help explain to countries around the globe, again, the benefits and the processes of Reliance. So, and also, to be honest, EMA from a dossier perspective, from a requirement perspective, is closer to a lot of countries in the world in terms of requirements. So it makes sense to that extent. We have seen also EMA very willingly be able to share the unredacted, quote unquote, unredacted assessment reports, not the public version of it, and release it back to the sponsor organizations. Of course, this is the sponsor organization, responsibilities, right, to share that together with the other countries, as well as hold the question and the answers. So EMA has been very open and says, we provide this to you as part of the Reliance program, and it's up to you to decide to who you want to share it with. I think to answer some of the questions that I've seen from Guy over here on the chat.
Right.
The confidentiality, yes, it is an issue, and it's a risk. It's a benefits risk that is taken by a life science organization. This is not taken by the reference health authorities. They only issue it back to the owner of the information, and it's really up to the company, again, to decide whatever they feel comfortable in sharing with again, in this case of Roche and other pilots, with very large numbers of countries. And that's really up to, what it is for the patients. So, again, and I think we see these evolutions more and more, and countries being more and more comfortable with this concept, and companies as well.
And Bakani, from your experiences in working with so many agencies around Africa, let's say, what's been your experience with regard to their interest in sharing and working together and collaborating? Ropa mentioned Zazibona as a really successful initiative that allows for information sharing and work sharing. What's your sense about the direction that these initiatives are taking, and how could platforms like the Accumulus and other platforms and information management systems assist in this process?
Thanks, Larry. So the interest is definitely there. Reliance is widely acknowledged as being a very important enabler in regulatory sciences and ensuring access to medicines. The key challenge that most authorities have reported in terms of reliance is just that access to information aspect of it. They struggle with getting non-publicly available assessment reports and even the inspection reports from the reference regulatory authorities. And so one of the suggestions to overcome this challenge is the signing of confidentiality agreements and putting in place MOUs to be able to facilitate that information exchange. I think that's the direction that it needs to go in, just to ensure that all parties are happy with the information that's being exchanged and that you don't have any of these confidentiality issues coming up while still ensuring access to medicines in a shorter time frame. Thanks.
Well, yeah, it's an evolving landscape. And Mario, do you have any final thoughts?
Yes, very briefly. Well, first, I think it was fascinating how Neil provided the view, the challenges, the benefits, and then like rising stars as reference and reliant agencies, their examples, and Accumulus as a great new technology. I have a question. If I guess for them, if an agency or a company would like their product or participate, what is it practically? How do they do it? Who decides which countries or which companies? I don't know if something can be shared about that. Yeah.
Of course. So let's start first from a company standpoint. So if a company wants to again use the platform, they can contact us directly. We can, the email address is provided, and then we'll work with them, and we'll work based on the subscriptions to get access to the platform for license organization, based on the size of the company. Again, affordability and access and democratization is key as a non-for-profit, and we'll work with the company to that extent. The who to invite is really up to the company, depending on the scope of their change and the scope of their submissions. Right, and so we play no role specifically in that areas, only to facilitate, I guess, the invitations. No, for national agencies, we work with them directly to provide them access to it. And again, as I mentioned, this is free access to all national regulatory agencies. Last night, we had a call with Oman, for example, to onboard them into the platforms, and we continue to onboard countries one by one, so they're available into the platform and can be used into future invitations in Reliance program. I know, and thank you, Ropa, as well, that Botswana do have access to the platform for a couple of pilots now. And so we continue to work with all those countries one by one, answering any questions they may have around, security, confidentialities, and access to this information, which is top of mind. And so we're happy to engage. And again, people can reach out to us directly, and we're happy to engage on a one-on-one basis. And again, create accounts and manage for them moving forward.
Brilliant. Well, as always, I have to say this has been a fun and very informative session. The goals of this series of seminars is really to leave each of you with some ideas that you can think about how individually you might think about using what you've learned, or what your organization can do with what you've learned today. So remember, a recording of this session will be made available shortly, and you can access it through the frpath.org website. And we're sure that you'll use the observations, the learnings that you've heard today in your activities going forward. So our next webinar will be Tuesday, February 18th, when we'll be discussing how are regulatory systems addressing the evolving clinical trials and clinical research landscape. This is a little bit of a departure, but still we're adhering to our mission of talking about things like reliance and facilitating regulatory activities. But we're going to take it from a little bit different point of view, looking at clinical trials and the clinical research landscape. Remember, the free registration will be available at the frpath.org website shortly and through our LinkedIn and email postings. So keep an eye for our emails. Remember to check out the resources at frpath.org, where you can find out lots more information about reliance and facilitated pathways. It is free access to regulators, so just reach out to us and we can help you with regard to accessing that. And if you're a company, reach out to us and we can, just as Dom said, equity is at the basis of what we do. So we don't put too many barriers in terms of making access available for companies. So once more, Mario and I would like to extend a very, very special thank you to our guests, to Neil, to Myung-Ah, who unfortunately did have to drop off, Ropa, Dom, and Bakani. And so Mario and I thank you for your interest and your participation. And as always, all our best until we meet again.